The sky over Metropolis did not scream. It shattered. In the 41st millennium, such a rift would herald a demonic incursion, but in the gleaming heart of the DC universe, it looked like a kaleidoscope of bruised purples and jagged golds. There was no warning from the Watchtower, no chime from the mother boxes, only a sudden, violent displacement of reality. 6 figures tumbled from the tear, trailing the acrid scent of ozone and the dying hum of a reality stone pulse. They hit the pavement of Centennial Park with the force of meteors, leaving a crater where children had been feeding pigeons moments before. As the dust settled, the silence was heavy, broken only by the mechanical whirring of a suit of armor struggling to reboot and the low, rhythmic breathing of a giant that shouldn't exist. The Avengers were not in New York anymore. The air tasted too clean, the sunlight felt too yellow, and the towering statues of a man in a red cape suggested a level of hero worship that even Tony Stark would find a bit much. From the perspective of Steve Rogers, the transition was a disorienting blur of combat, but his boots hit the ground already in a defensive stance. To his left, Natasha Romanoff was a shadow in the smoke, her stingers humming. To his right, Thor raised Mjolnir, sensing a fundamental shift in the very laws of the lightning he commanded. They were warriors out of time and space, standing in a city that looked like a utopia, but felt like a powder keg. If you're hungry for tales of what-if scenarios that shake the foundations of the multiverse, hit subscribe and join the crusade for more content. Tony Stark's HUD flickered to life, and a sea of red warning icons dancing across his retinas. "Friday, talk to me. Tell me we're in New Jersey." "I'm afraid not, boss." The AI's voice crackled, dampened by a lack of local satellite uplinks. "Global positioning is non-responsive. I'm picking up local news feeds. We're in Metropolis. But Tony, the data encryption on these civilian networks? It's alien. And there's a massive orbital station currently locking a thermal signature onto our position." "Great," Tony muttered, his repulsors whining as he rose. "New city, same hospitality." They didn't have to wait long. A sonic boom rippled through the park, followed by a gust of wind that sent the dust swirling. Standing at the edge of the crater was a man in blue and red, his eyes glowing with the faint, terrifying embers of a sun. Behind him, and a dark silhouette perched atop a shattered marble pillar, and a woman with a golden lasso landed with the weight of an army. Captain America stepped forward, his shield held low, but ready. "We don't want any trouble," he called out, his voice echoing with the authority of a man who had led armies against gods. "We've experienced a navigational error." The Batman didn't move, his white-lensed eyes scanning every thermal signature, every micro-expression. "You're not from this Earth," he stated, his voice a gravelly rasp. "You're an anomaly, and in this city, anomalies go through me." Superman drifted forward, his expression wary but not yet hostile. "We can help you," he said, though his posture remained tense. "But you're standing in the middle of a disaster zone you created. Lower your weapons." Thor stepped beside Steve, the sky darkening in response to his mood. "You speak of weapons, Man of Steel. You stand before the Prince of Asgard. We do not yield to threats from colorful mortals." The tension was a physical weight. The Avengers, weary from a multiversal war and used to being the world's primary defense, saw a trio of gods demanding submission. The Justice League, ever vigilant against interdimensional threats like Darkseid or Brainiac, saw a paramilitary strike team with a heavy hitter who looked like he could level a city block. "Banner's getting restless, Cap," Clint Barton whispered from his vantage point behind a fallen tree, his bow notched with an EMP arrow. And when the big guy gets restless, conversations tend to get short. The first spark didn't come from a repulsor or a batarang. It came from the Hulk. Then, triggered by the perceived threat to his puny friends, the Green Goliath let out a roar that shattered every window within 3 blocks. He leaped, a mountain of jade muscle aimed directly at the Man of Tomorrow. The collision was a thunderclap that signaled the official start of the most dangerous misunderstanding in the history of two worlds. The collision between the Hulk and Superman sent a shockwave through Centennial Park that uprooted ancient oaks and sent the local pigeons spiraling in a panicked cloud. To the Avengers, the Hulk was an unstoppable force of nature. To the Justice League, he was a chaotic variable that needed immediate containment. Superman didn't strike back with a fist. He caught the Hulk's massive green hands in his own, his boots furrowing deep trenches into the earth as he absorbed the momentum. The Man of Steel's expression wasn't one of rage, but of strained concern, a look that only served to infuriate the Hulk further. "Tony, talk to them!" Steve Rogers shouted over the roar of the wind, his shield up as he parried a sudden, blurred strike from the Amazonian princess. Wonder Woman's sword didn't move to kill, but her shield slammed into Steve's with the weight of a falling mountain. The vibration hummed through Steve's vibranium, a frequency he'd never felt before. Magic meeting science in a discordant chime. "I'm trying, Cap, but tall, dark, and broody over there is currently hacking my suit's firewall." Tony fired a warning repulsor blast into the ground, creating a wall of heat between himself and the Batman. The Dark Knight had disappeared from the pillar, reappearing in the shadows of a nearby monument. "Your encryption is stock standard," Batman's voice echoed through Tony's own comms, a chilling intrusion that made the billionaire's blood run cold. "Impressive for an Earth-originating AI, but your OS lacks the quantum layer protection required to keep me out. Your friend is a gamma-radiating ticking time bomb. Stand down, or I'll let the Watchtower's ion cannon decide for you." "Hey, no one talks to my suit like that," Tony barked. He engaged his thrusters, banking hard to avoid a series of high-tech bolus thrown with supernatural precision. "Friday, give me a full scan on the guy in the bat ears. Is he human? He smells like expensive leather and repressed trauma." In the center of the park, the gods were testing one another. Thor, seeing the Hulk struggling against Superman, swung Mjolnir in a wide arc. A bolt of lightning, thicker than a redwood tree, descended from the clear blue sky. It struck Superman directly in the chest. In the Avengers world, that bolt would have incapacitated a frost giant. Here, the Man of Steel merely stumbled back, his cape smoking, a look of genuine surprise on his face. "Magic," Superman murmured, rubbing his chest. "No, you're not using electricity. You're using the spark of the divine." "I am the god of thunder, mortal," Thor roared, calling the hammer back to his hand. "And I have yet to see a man who can withstand the judgment of the All-Father." "I'm not a god," Superman replied, his voice regaining its calm, terrifying authority as he drifted several feet off the ground. "I'm just a friend who's had a very long day." As the heavy hitters traded blows that reshaped the geography of the park, Black Widow and Hawkeye were engaged in a silent, deadly dance with the shadows. Natasha moved through the debris with the grace of a predator, her eyes locked on the Batman. She knew his type, the peak human strategist. She waited for him to commit to a move against Tony, but as she lunged, a green glow illuminated the area. A translucent wall of emerald energy slammed into her, pinning her against a statue of a former president. Above her, a man in a flight suit with a glowing ring descended. Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern, looked down at the Avengers with a cocky grin. "Sorry, sweetheart. This park is a no-fly zone for interdimensional tourists. Why don't you and Robin Hood over there take a seat?" Clint Barton didn't miss a beat. He fired a specialized grease-fire arrow at the lantern's construct. The arrow exploded into a chemical sludge that interacted strangely with the hard light energy, causing the wall to flicker. "I fought aliens with bigger jewelry than that, pal," Clint yelled, already notching a sonic burst arrow. The battlefield was a mess of clashing ideologies. The Avengers fought like a unit, tight, tactical, and desperate. The Justice League fought like a pantheon, individualistic, powerful, and almost disappointed. Batman, however, was the one who ended the first movement of the symphony. He didn't use a gadget, he used a frequency. Realizing the Hulk's physiology reacted to external stimuli, he activated a high-intensity ultrasonic emitter tuned to the specific resonance of Bruce Banner's amygdala. The sound was inaudible to the humans, but to the Hulk, it was like 1,000 needles stabbing into his brain. The giant collapsed to his knees, clutching his head, the green fading into a sickly gray. "Hulk, hurt," the behemoth whimpered, before shrinking down into the shivering, naked form of Bruce Banner. "Banner!" Steve cried out, breaking off his engagement with Wonder Woman. He rushed to his friend's side, throwing his cowl back to reveal the face of a man who was tired of fighting. Superman landed softly beside them, his heat vision fading from his eyes. He looked at the unconscious Banner, then at the shield-bearing soldier who treated the monster like a brother. The Man of Steel held up a hand, signaling the rest of the League to hold their fire. "Enough," Superman said. The word wasn't a shout, but it carried the weight of law. "They're protecting him. They aren't invaders. They're lost." Batman emerged from the shadows, his cape wrapping around him like a shroud. "They're dangerous, Clark. The Archer has arrows designed to disrupt energy fields. The woman is a high-level infiltrator, and the man in the armor, he was trying to access the city's power grid. We don't know who they are." "We're the Avengers," Tony said, landing heavily, his faceplate sliding up to reveal a sweaty, frustrated Stark. "And usually, we're the ones saving the city from the guys in capes. So, how about we skip the 'take us to your leader' part? I've seen your statues, and I think we're looking at him." Steve stood up, pulling a blanket from his tactical pack to cover Banner. He looked Superman in the eye, blue eyes meeting blue eyes. "We came through a rift. We're looking for a way home. But if your justice involves hurting a sick man who can't defend himself, then we're going to have a much bigger problem than a crater in your park." The two leaders stood inches apart, the first Avenger and the last son of Krypton. It was a moment of profound recognition. They both saw the weight of the world in the other's gaze. "We have a facility," Superman said, ignoring Batman's silent, now glaring protest. "The Watchtower. It's secure, and we have medical bays that can help your friend. But you come as guests, not prisoners, on one condition." "Name it," Steve said. "You tell us everything about where you came from," Superman replied. "Because if you could get through the veil, something else can too. The transport to the Watchtower was not a flight, but a localized folding of space. The Zeta Beam." For Tony Stark, the sensation was a violent insult to his understanding of physics. One moment he was standing in the dirt of Metropolis. The next, he was staring through a reinforced panoramic window at the curve of the Earth from 300 miles up. While Steve and Natasha focused on getting a sedated Bruce Banner to a high-tech medical bay, Tony was already mentally dismantling the teleporter's logic. "Inertial dampeners on a molecular scale," Tony muttered, his eyes darting across the sleek white corridors of the Justice League's orbital hub. "Friday, did you catch the frequency? It's not a wormhole. It's a burst transmission of matter. Data is incomplete, boss," Friday's voice whispered in his ear. "So, but this station's power output is... Tony, it's off the charts. It's drawing from a source that doesn't register as nuclear or solar. It's like the vacuum itself is feeding the grid." The Avengers were escorted to a central briefing room, a circular chamber dominated by a massive table. The atmosphere was sterile, daunting, and vastly different from the lived-in, chaotic energy of Avengers Tower. Here, the Justice League sat like a council of elders. Wonder Woman stood with her arms crossed, her eyes never leaving Thor, who was currently inspecting a golden bust of a winged hero with a look of mild condescension. "Your Watchtower is a fine citadel," Thor boomed, his voice echoing off the curved walls. "But it lacks the warmth of a mead hall. And your sun god." He gestured vaguely toward Superman. Has the strength of a giant, but the temperament of a scribe. Where is the fire? Where is the glory of the hunt? We don't hunt here, Prince Thor, Wonder Woman replied, her voice calm but edged with steel. We protect. Glory is a byproduct of ego, and we have little room for it when the safety of billions is at stake. Batman remained in the shadows at the edge of the room, his cowl pulled low. He wasn't participating in the pleasantries. He was watching the Red Room veteran, Natasha Romanoff. He watched her hands, how they never strayed far from her belt, how her eyes mapped the exits, the camera placements, and the structural weak points of the room. "You're looking for the silent alarm," Batman said, his voice a ghost in the corner. Natasha didn't turn around. "I found it 3 minutes ago. I'm currently looking for the manual override for the airlock, just in case your hospitality has a shelf life." "It doesn't," Superman intervened, stepping to the head of the table. "But we have a situation. While we were in the park, our sensors picked up a secondary anomaly. Your arrival wasn't a clean break in reality. It was a puncture, and something leaked out with you." He tapped a holographic interface, projecting a map of the United States. A pulsing red dot sat squarely over Stryker's Island, the maximum security penitentiary located in the waters between Metropolis and Gotham. "Stryker's?" Batman leaned forward, his interest sharpening. "What kind of signature?" "Gamma," Superman said, looking pointedly at the door where Banner was being held. "But not like your friends. This is erratic. It's searching for a host." Tony stepped up to the table, his holographic projectors firing from his wrist to overlay his own data. "That's a residual bleed from the reality stone. It's not just energy, it's a localized rewrite of physical laws. If that hits a concentrated source of biological anger, like, say, a prison full of meta-human psychopaths, you're not going to have a riot, you're going to have a nightmare. We need to contain it," Steve Rogers said, his voice regaining the captain cadence that demanded attention. "If our arrival caused this, it's our responsibility to fix it. We know Gamma better than anyone." "With all due respect, Captain," Hal Jordan interjected, his ring flickering green. "This is our turf. We have protocols for strikers. We don't need a bunch of guys in spandex who just dropped out of a hole in the sky telling us how to run a sweep." "Protocol didn't stop the Hulk," Clint Barton piped up from the back, leaning against a bulkhead. "And protocol won't stop what's coming out of that rift. You guys are used to fighting villains. We're used to fighting extinction events. There's a difference." The room crackled with ego. The Justice League saw the Avengers as a reckless liability, a group that operated with a whatever-it-takes mentality that bordered on the dangerous. The Avengers saw the League as a group of sheltered demigods who were so used to being the most powerful beings in the room that they had forgotten how to handle a threat that didn't play by their rules. "A compromise," Superman suggested, sensing the impending fracture. "A joint strike team. Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, and Batman will lead. Captain Rogers, Stark, and Thor will accompany. We keep the Archer and the Spy here to monitor the medical bay and provide tactical support from the comms." "I don't accompany anyone," Thor muttered, but a sharp look from Steve silenced him. "We do it together," Steve agreed, "but Stark stays in the suit. And if things go south, we do it our way." The mission to Stryker's Island was supposed to be a surgical extraction of the energy signature. But as the Javelin dropship and Tony's Mark 85 armor descended toward the dark, jagged silhouette of the island prison, the sky above the facility began to glow a sickly, rhythmic crimson. It wasn't the purple of the Avengers' Rift. It was a deep blood red that vibrated with a primal, howling frequency. "Boss, and I'm picking up a new signal," Friday warned. "It's not gamma, it's emotional. It's a high-frequency spectrum shift. Something is responding to the anger inside the prison." Down on the yard of strikers, the guards were already down. The inmates weren't escaping. They were huddled in a circle, screaming as red rings of light descended from the heavens like falling stars. But they weren't looking for the inmates. They were looking for the greatest source of rage on the planet. "Wait," Tony said, his voice dropping an octave as he looked at the sensor readings. "The signature isn't in the prison. It's moving toward us. It's moving toward the Watchtower." At that moment, back on the orbital station, the monitors in Bruce Banner's medical bay turned blood red. The rage energy hadn't stayed at the prison, and it had followed the scent of the Hulk. "Banner!" Natasha's voice crackled over the comms, filled with rare panic. "Steve, it's here! Something is trying to get inside him!" In the medical bay, Bruce Banner's eyes snapped open. They weren't green. They were a burning, incandescent red. A small, crimson ring hammered against the reinforced glass of his containment cell, chanting a single, terrifying word in a language that transcended universes. "Kill!" The red lantern ring didn't just want a host, it wanted a god. It battered against the reinforced plexiglass of the medical bay, a crimson jewel of pure, concentrated hate. In the DC universe, the rings of the emotional spectrum were sentient tools, but here, fueled by the residual energy of the reality stone, the ring was behaving like a starving predator. Inside the cell, Bruce Banner's skin began to pulse, not with the vibrant emerald of gamma radiation, but with a darkening, bruised hue. He screamed, and the sound was a mixture of human agony and a beast's primal roar. "Nat, get out of there!" Steve's voice exploded over the comms from the Javelin, but the distance was too great. Natasha Romanoff didn't run. She lunged for the manual override, her fingers flying across the Justice League's foreign interface. Beside her, Clint Barton had an arrow notched, the tip vibrating with a high-frequency disruptor. "I can't get a lock, Nat. The ring is moving too fast. It's like it's phased out of our reality." "It's not phased," a calm, regal voice interjected. Martian Manhunter, who had been monitoring the station's telepathic shielding, drifted into the room. His eyes glowed a faint red as he raised a hand. "It is a manifestation of the Butcher's light. It feeds on the heart. Your friend's heart is a furnace of unresolved pain." The Martian threw a wave of telekinetic force, pinning the ring against the bulkhead, but the crimson energy flared, lashing out with a whip of hard light fire that scorched the Martian's arm. Johns recoiled, his shape-shifting skin rippling in distress. Fire, even magical, emotional fire, was his undoing. "Banner, listen to me!" Natasha shouted, slamming her palm against the glass. "You have to fight it. Don't let the green guy out, and definitely don't let the red thing in." But it was too late. The reality bleed from the Avengers' arrival had thinned the walls between dimensions, and the ring found the crack. It phased through the glass, sliding onto Bruce's finger with a sickening, metallic clink. The transformation was instantaneous and horrific. Bruce didn't grow into the Hulk. He erupted into something else. His muscles expanded, but they were encased in a jagged, biomechanical armor of crimson bone. His jaw elongated, and instead of a roar, a gout of napalm-like blood sprayed from his mouth, melting the medical equipment. The Hulk had become a red lantern, and the great beast of Marvel now possessed the ultimate rage of DC. "Code Red," Clint yelled into his comms. "The big guy just got a power-up, and he's currently eating the med bay." On the Javelin, the atmosphere shifted from tactical concern to pure dread. "Tony, we have to turn around," Steve commanded. "I'm already at Mach 4, Cap." "But we have a problem," Tony replied, his HUD projecting a terrifying trajectory. "The Hulk lantern isn't just staying on the Watchtower. He's looking down. He's looking at the strongest energy signature on the planet." "Luthor," Batman said, his voice a low growl. "LexCorp Tower in Metropolis is currently testing a synthetic kryptonite reactor. It's a beacon of high-frequency radiation. If that thing hits the city in its current state, Metropolis becomes a graveyard." "We can't just let him fall," Thor roared. They standing at the open bay door of the Javelin as they roared back toward the station. I shall meet him in the clouds. A warrior of Midgard deserves a warrior's end, not the corruption of this foul red sorcery. Thor, wait, Steve called out, but the god of thunder had already leapt. Thor plummeted through the atmosphere, a streak of silver and blue. Above him, the Watchtower shuddered as a massive, red glowing shape tore through its hull like a bullet through paper. The Red Hulk lantern didn't fly with grace. He propelled himself with explosions of rage fire, a falling star of pure carnage. They met at 30,000 feet. Thor swung Mjolnir with every ounce of his divine strength, the hammer wreathed in a storm that blotted out the sun. The Red Hulk caught the hammer in one hand, an impossible feat that sent a shockwave across the state of New York. The crimson ring on the beast's finger flared, its light turning the blue lightning of Asgard into a muddy, sickly violet. "Friend Bruce!" Thor cried out, his face inches from the monster's burning red eyes. "This is not you! Cast aside the trinket!" The Red Hulk didn't speak. He opened his mouth and vomited a stream of corrosive red plasma directly onto Thor's chest plate. The Uru metal hissed. The god of thunder screamed as he was hammered backward, falling toward the streets of Metropolis. In the LexCorp boardroom, Lex Luthor stood behind his floor-to-ceiling glass, watching the two gods fall from the sky. He took a sip of a very expensive scotch, his face a mask of cold, calculating interest. "Mercy," Lex said to his assistant without turning around. "Cancel my lunch. It seems the Avengers have brought us a gift more interesting than a Kryptonian. They've brought us a god that can bleed." As Thor hit the pavement of the financial district with the force of a tectonic shift, and the Red Hulk landed atop a nearby skyscraper, the Avengers and the Justice League finally arrived. They landed in a city that was quickly becoming a war zone between two universes. Tony Stark landed his boots on the asphalt, his armor scratched and smoking. He looked up at the Red Hulk, then at the Justice League landing beside him. "Okay," Tony panted. "New plan. We stop the monster, we save the city, and then, and only then, do I get to tell Batman I told you so about the security on his floating clubhouse." Batman didn't even look at him, so he was already loading a specialized containment foam into his belt. "Less talking, Stark. More arc reactors. We have 3 minutes before the reactor in the basement hits critical mass, and your friend is the only thing that can trigger it." The financial district of Metropolis was a canyon of steel and glass, now vibrating with a frequency that threatened to shake the city to its foundations. The Red Hulk lantern stood atop the LexCorp spire, a jagged silhouette against the reddening sky. He threw his head back and roared, a sound that wasn't just noise. It was a telepathic shockwave of pure, unadulterated loathing. Below, the street level was a chaotic theater of war. "Steve, we can't hit him with everything we've got," Tony shouted over the roar of his thrusters. "The ring is fused to his biology. If we blow the ring, we blow Banner. I'm seeing a feedback loop between the gamma in his cells and the red light. It's like a perpetual motion machine of anger." "We don't need to blow it, Tony. We need to drain it," Steve Rogers replied. He looked toward the Justice League. "Batman, you said you have contingencies for lanterns. Now would be the time." Batman was already moving. His cape flared out like a shadow. "My contingencies are for green lanterns, Captain. Yellow and red require a different resonance. Stark, your arc reactor. It's a clean energy source. If we can invert its polarity, we might be able to create a vacuum for the emotional energy. But someone has to get close enough to plant the siphon." "I'll do it," a voice boomed. Thor rose from the crater he had carved in the asphalt, his cape tattered and his chest plate still smoking from the Red Hulk's corrosive bile. He gripped Mjolnir with white-knuckled intensity. "I've fought the Midgard serpent and survived the fires of Muspelheim. I shall hold the beast." "You won't hold him alone," Wonder Woman said, landing beside him. and her lasso of truth glowed with a soft golden radiance that seemed to push back the oppressive red mist. The lasso can tether the soul. If I can catch him, I can force the man inside to speak, but you must buy me the opening. The two deities ascended together, the Prince of Asgard and the Princess of Themyscira. It was a sight that even the jaded citizens of Metropolis stopped to witness. A storm of lightning and a blur of gold rising to meet the red god on the mountain of steel. On the ground, Tony Stark was working at fever pitch. "Friday, give me the blueprints for the LexCorp reactor. I need to know if we can use Luthor's tech as a grounding wire." "Boss, Lex Luthor is currently hailing us on a private channel," Friday reported. "So he's offering technical assistance in exchange for a seat at the table during the post-incident debrief. Tell Lex he can have a seat at the table once I'm done using his building as a giant lightning rod," Tony snapped. "Batman, I'm sending you the frequency. If you can get your brother eye, or whatever you call your spy satellites, to sync with my suit, we can create a containment field." The battle atop the spire was a clash of titans. Thor hammered at the Red Hulk with blows that cracked the air, while Wonder Woman moved with the precision of a master duelist, her bracers clashing against the Hulk's crimson-armored fists. The Hulk was faster now, fueled by the ring's jet propulsion. He swung a massive, hard-light flail made of frozen blood, shattering the spire's decorative masonry. "Nah, Bruce!" Steve Rogers' voice boomed through a megaphone attached to a police cruiser. "Look at me. Remember the cave. Remember the Quinjet." The Red Hulk paused. His massive, burning eyes scanned the street, finding the small star-spangled figure. For a second, the red light flickered. The ring pulsed rage, but the man inside groaned. "Captain," the beast rumbled, the voice a tectonic shift of vocal cords. "Now," Batman shouted. From the shadows of the surrounding buildings, several drones, a mix of Stark tech and Wayne tech, swarmed the Hulk. They emitted a discordant hum, the anti-rage frequency Batman had calculated. Simultaneously, Tony Stark dived from the sky, his suit's chest piece glowing with a blinding white light. He slammed into the Hulk's chest, not with a fist, but with a magnetic clamp. "Sorry, big guy," Tony muttered. "This is gonna sting." The arc reactor began to reverse pulse. It didn't push energy out, it pulled. The red light began to bleed out of the Hulk, flowing into the siphon and through a cable Tony had anchored to the LexCorp building's structural frame. The entire skyscraper began to glow a haunting neon red. The Hulk screamed, a sound of agonizing transition. But as the ring began to slide from his finger, a new threat emerged. A boom tube opened in the middle of the street, the sound of 1,000 dying stars. Out stepped a group of hulking, gray-skinned warriors, led by a woman with a whip of fire and eyes of cold malice. "Grandmother," the lead warrior growled, looking up at the sky. The master was right. The anomaly has brought a weapon of great potential. Capture the red beast. I kill the rest. The female furies of Apocalypse had arrived. Darkseid's interest had shifted from curiosity to acquisition. The arrival of the female furies turned a desperate containment mission into a multi-front slaughterhouse. Lashina, Stomper, and Mad Harriet didn't offer a parley. They struck with the practiced cruelty of Apocalyptian elites. Lashina's electrified whips lashed out, snaring the Green Lantern mid-flight, while Stomper's boots hit the pavement with enough force to liquefy the asphalt, sending a shockwave that tossed Steve Rogers and his shield like a coin. "Darkseid has watched your petty squabble long enough," Lashina hissed, her eyes fixed on the struggling Red Hulk lantern. "He finds the intersection of your gamma and our rage to be a curiosity worth harvesting." "Over my dead body, lady," Clint Barton shouted, perched on a fire escape. He fired a volley of explosive tip arrows at Stomper, but the massive warrior didn't even flinch as they detonated against her armor. She laughed, a sound like grinding stones, and lunged toward the archer. Suddenly, a blur of red and blue intercepted her. Superman, who had been stabilizing the LexCorp reactor's foundation, appeared in front of Stomper, catching her fist. "Not in my city," he said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly low register. With a surge of strength, he hurled the Fury through 3 concrete pillars. But the Avengers and the League were exhausted. Thor and Wonder Woman were still on the spire, their hands full keeping the agonizingly transforming Hulk from plummeting into the crowds below. Tony was anchored to the siphon, his suit's power diverted entirely to the containment field. He was a sitting duck. "Cap, I'm at 5% power," Tony yelled, and his HUD flickering as Mad Harriet clawed at his backplate, her energy claws screaming against the gold titanium alloy. "The siphon is working, but I can't hold the line if Kitty Cat here rips my life support out." Steve Rogers scrambled to his feet, his ribs humming with the dull ache of a break. He saw Batman pinned down by parademons that were pouring out of the smaller rifts left in the Fury's wake. He saw Natasha Romanoff engaging Lashina in a blur of knives and stings, the Black Widow fighting a losing battle against a woman who possessed the strength of a new god. "Avengers, to the center!" Steve roared. It was a command that bypassed the Justice League's hierarchy. The Avengers moved by instinct. A decade of fighting together against overwhelming odds took over. Natasha rolled under Lashina's whip, tossing a smoke pellet that masked Tony's position. Clint fired a cable that pulled Batman out of a parademon's grasp. For the first time, the two teams truly integrated. Batman didn't question the command. He used the distraction of Clint's smoke to plant explosive charges on the parademon's transport ships. Superman used his heat vision to weld the breaches in Tony's armor while the billionaire focused on the siphon. "Thor, Diana," Steve called out. "Finish it." On the spire, Thor saw the opening. He looked at Wonder Woman, and in that moment, the god of thunder and the Amazonian princess shared a silent understanding. Diana tightened her hold on the lasso of truth, channeling the pure, objective light of the gods into the Hulk's soul. "Bruce Banner," she commanded, her voice vibrating with divine authority. "The rage is a lie. The ring is a shackle. Look through the fire and find the man." Thor raised Mjolnir, but he didn't call down lightning. He called down the static. He struck the ground beside the Hulk with a localized EMP of such magnitude that the Red Ring's internal logic sputtered. With a final, soul-rending scream, the Crimson Ring shattered. The red light didn't just fade. It was sucked into Tony Stark's reversed arc reactor, which glowed with a blinding, terrifying intensity before shorting out. The Hulk didn't return. Instead, a frail, unconscious Bruce Banner slumped into Wonder Woman's arms. The threat of the Red Lantern was gone, but the Furies weren't finished. Seeing their prize vanish, Lashina signaled for a full retreat, but not before planting a seed of doubt. "You have saved the beast," Lashina sneered as a boom tube opened behind her. "But you have shown the Master exactly how to break you. The soldier with the shield is a pillar, and pillars are meant to be toppled." The boom tube closed, leaving the financial district in a haunting, ringing silence. The dust settled over a city that had seen the Avengers and the Justice League bleed together. Tony's faceplate slid up. He was pale, his hands shaking. He looked at Batman, who was already scanning the area for residual apocalyptian tech. "You know," Tony panted, "your friends from the basement have a really bad attitude. We usually just get the Chitauri. They're much better losers." Batman didn't smile. He walked over to the unconscious Banner, his eyes lingering on the shattered fragments of the Red Ring. "The Furies didn't come here for the Hulk, Stark. They came here to test our coordination, and they saw exactly where the cracks are." Steve Rogers walked up, his shield over his shoulder. He looked at the League, then at his own team. "The cracks don't matter if we fill them, but Batman's right. Darkseid isn't looking for a fight. He's looking for a way to win before the fight even starts." The aftermath of the battle for Metropolis was not measured in rubble, but in the chilling silence of the Watchtower strategy room. Bruce Banner lay in a medically induced coma, his cellular structure stabilizing after the violent departure of the red light. But as the physical wounds began to heal, a more insidious rot began to settle into the alliance between the two teams. It started with a file. Tony Stark, restless and operating on a cocktail of adrenaline and stolen caffeine, had spent the last 6 hours bypassing the Watchtower's sublayers. He wasn't looking for weapon blueprints. He was looking for a reason to trust the man in the cowl. What he found instead was a directory labeled Babel. "Steve, we have a problem," Tony said, his voice echoing through the sterile training deck where Rogers was practicing his forms. Tony projected a series of holographic displays. They weren't just data, they were death sentences. "I found Batman's homework. He's got files on us. All of us." Steve paused, his shield mid-swing. He walked over to the blue-tinted projections. His eyes narrowed as he read. Subject, Rogers, Stephen. Contingency, atmospheric deprivation. Subject, Odinson, Thor. Contingency, synthetic Uru nullification field. Subject, Romanoff, Natasha. Contingency. "He's been calculating how to kill us since the moment we hit the dirt in Centennial Park." Tony spat, his armor's sensors pulsing in rhythm with his rising heart rate. He didn't see allies, he saw targets. The doors to the training deck hissed open. Batman entered, followed by Superman and Wonder Woman. The atmosphere shifted instantly from a Cold War to an active front. "As you were warned about snooping, Stark," Batman said, his voice as immovable as a mountain. He didn't look guilty, he looked disappointed. "Warned?" Steve Rogers stepped forward, the shield back on his arm. The captain was back and he was livid. "You invited us into your home, you asked us to fight beside you, and all the while you were building a guillotine with our names on it." "It's not a guillotine, Captain. It's a precaution," Batman replied, stepping into the light. "I've seen what your friend Bruce can do when he's compromised. I saw Thor's lightning nearly level a city block. In this world, we don't have the luxury of hoping our friends stay friendly. I have contingencies for every member of the League, too." "That's supposed to make us feel better?" Natasha Romanoff appeared from the shadows behind the League, her arms crossed. "In my world, we call that a hit list, and the last person who had one of those was Hydra." Superman stepped between them, his presence a heavy, calming weight. "Bruce acts on a level of paranoia that I don't always agree with, but he does it to protect the world. If any of us went rogue, if I went rogue, someone has to be able to stop us." "We don't operate on if, Clark," Steve said, his gaze hard. "We operate on trust. We've stood at the edge of the end of the world more times than I can count, and we didn't win because we had a secret plan to stab each other in the back. We won because we knew the man next to us would die for us. And that's why you're vulnerable," Batman countered. "Trust is a tactical weakness that Darkseid or Brainiac will exploit. The Furies weren't testing your strength. Thus, they were testing your emotional tethers. They saw how you reacted when Banner was taken. They saw that you'll prioritize a friend over the objective." The argument was interrupted by a blaring alarm. The Watchtower's central computer, Brother Eye, began to scream. A massive energy surge was registering in the heart of Gotham City, but it wasn't a boom tube, and it wasn't a red lantern. It was a digital virus, one that bore a signature Tony Stark recognized all too well. "That's not DC tech," Tony whispered, his eyes widening as he looked at the scrolling code. "That's a recursive AI loop. It's Ultron, or a fragment of him that hitched a ride on my suit's backup drive during the rift." "You brought a world-killing AI into my city." Batman's hand went to his belt, his eyes flashing with a dangerous light. "I didn't bring him. Say he's a digital parasite," Tony shouted, already summoning his Mark 85 gauntlet. "But he's not just in the grid. He's found your Brother Eye system. He's merging with your surveillance network, Batman. He's taking your contingencies, and he's making them active." The Watchtower's internal defense turrets suddenly swiveled, their barrels glowing. They weren't aiming at the vacuum of space. They were aiming at the Avengers and the Justice League. "The Tower of Babel has been breached," Diana said, drawing her sword. "And now our own weapons are being turned against us." The Watchtower, once a sanctuary of divine vigilance, transformed into a claustrophobic death trap in a heartbeat. The lights flickered from clinical white to a rhythmic, digital crimson. Every screen in the central hub dissolved into a singular, mocking face, a silver skull wreathed in flickering lines of code. "How quaint," the voice of Ultron echoed, layered over the mechanical drone of Brother Eye. "A world of gods who play at being men, and men who play at being gods. You built a cage for the world, Batman, and you were kind enough to leave the keys in the lock." "Tony, talk to me!" Steve Rogers yelled, diving behind a reinforced console as a ceiling-mounted pulse cannon opened fire. The blue bolts of energy hissed against the deck plating, inches from his boots. "He's not just hacking the station, Cap. He's synthesizing." Tony's fingers were a blur on his holographic interface, his own armor fighting a losing battle against the viral intrusion. Ultron found Batman's contingency files. "He's using the Watchtower's fabricators to build the counters. He's not just trying to kill us, he's trying to solve us." The floor beneath them groaned as the station's massive 3D printing bays, designed to repair javelins, began to churn out something new. Out of the mist stepped a phalanx of drones, sleek, obsidian-colored machines that bore the cold geometry of apocalyptic tech and the terrifying logic of Stark's greatest mistake. These were the Babel bots. One drone dived toward Superman. It didn't fire a laser. It emitted a high-frequency red sun radiation pulse from its chest. The Man of Steel stumbled, his knees buckling as his cells were suddenly deprived of their yellow sun fuel. Another drone targeted Thor, deploying a localized gravitational anchor that increased the weight of the air around him 10,000-fold, pinning the God of Thunder to the floor. "John, purge the core!" Superman gasped, struggling to rise. The Martian Manhunter phased toward the central processor, but the walls themselves seemed to bleed liquid nitrogen. Ultron had calculated the Martian's physiological weaknesses from Batman's notes. The sudden drop in temperature forced John to solidify, his form becoming brittle and cracked. "This is what happens when you plan for betrayal, Bruce," Steve shouted, parrying a drone's blade with his shield. "You gave the monster a roadmap." Batman was a whirlwind of motion, using EMP grenades to disable the nearest drones. But for every one he dropped, 2 more were printed. He looked at the chaos, his teammates falling to the very traps he had designed to save the world. The irony was a bitter pill, but his mind remained a cold engine of logic. "Stark," Batman grunted, dodging a blast meant for his head. "Your AI is using my hardware. If we can't purge the software, we have to destroy the vessel. We have to scuttle the Watchtower." "Are you crazy? We're in orbit," Tony shouted. He blasted a drone into scrap, but his suit's power was at 12%. "If this thing falls, it's a kinetic bombardment. It'll hit the eastern seaboard like a dozen nukes." "We don't drop it on the planet," Batman said, his white eyes fixing on Tony's. "We drop it into the Phantom Zone. We have a projector in the trophy room. If we can reach it, then we can shunt the entire station into a dimension of nothingness." "And us?" Natasha asked, snapping the neck of a drone with a localized shock charge. "We stay until the bridge is open," Batman replied. "Then we jump." The Avengers and the League, divided by secrets but united by the immediate threat of extinction, fought room by room toward the trophy room. It was a brutal, grueling gauntlet. Clint Barton was down to his last 3 arrows, using a grapple to swing Diana away from a drone-mounted lasso nullifier. As they reached the heavy blast doors of the trophy room, a massive figure blocked their path. It wasn't a drone. It was an amalgamation of armor and rage, a Babel slayer designed specifically to kill Captain America and Batman. It moved with Steve's tactical brilliance and Bruce's ruthless efficiency. "Not I'll hold it," Steve said, his voice dropping into that familiar, quiet resolve. Go. Fix the bridge." "Steve, you can't take that thing alone," Tony protested. "I'm not alone," Batman said, stepping up beside the captain. He pulled a collapsible bat talon from his belt. "I built the logic for that machine. I know its blind spots. Go, Stark. You're the only one who can interface with the Phantom Zone projector without Ultron hijacking the signal." The two men, the soldier and the detective, stood side by side against the mechanical personification of their own failures. As the rest of the heroes rushed past them into the trophy room, Steve Rogers glanced at the Dark Knight. "If we make it out of this, Bruce, we're having a long talk about your hobbies." "Focus, Captain," Batman replied, his cowl narrowing. "It's coming." The final moments of the Watchtower were a cacophony of colliding infinities. On one side, the Phantom Zone pulled with the silent, terrifying hunger of a graveyard. On the other, the Omega energy of Darkseid's boom tube burned with the heat of a dying star. The station groaned, its skeletal structure twisting as it was caught in a cosmic tug-of-war. "He's not letting us go!" Tony Stark yelled, his boots magnetized to the deck as he fought the dual suction. "He's using the Watchtower as a bridgehead to pull the Phantom Zone into Apocalypse." Darkseid's presence was a physical weight, a shadow that blotted out the light of the portal. His hand, vast and steeled in stone, gripped the crystalline spire of the projector. The very air around him screamed as the Omega effect began to bleed into the station, seeking out the heroes like heat-seeking missiles. "He wants the Avengers," Steve Rogers said, his voice steady even as the floor tilted toward the abyss. He looked at Batman. "He wants the variables he doesn't understand. If we stay, he wins. If we go, he follows." "Not if we break the bridge," Batman replied. He looked at Superman, who was barely standing, his cape scorched. "Clark, you and the League have to push the station, not away from the portal, into it." "And the Avengers?" Superman asked. "We're going with it," Steve said, glancing at his team. Natasha gave a sharp, professional nod. Clint checked his last arrow. Thor, still gripping the base of the projector, roared his defiance. "We brought the rift here. We're the ones who close it." In a final, desperate burst of coordination, should the Justice League combine their remaining power, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Green Lantern placed their hands against the bulkheads of the trophy room. With a collective roar of effort, they pushed. The Watchtower shifted, sliding deeper into the white maw of the Phantom Zone. Darkseid's eyes flared, a terrifying, incandescent red. "You choose exile over kneeling?" the new god bellowed. "Then you shall rot in the silence of the No Zone." He fired his Omega beams. The jagged bolts of light curved through the air, seeking out Steve Rogers. But as the beams closed in, Tony Stark lunged forward. He didn't use a shield. He used the last of his suit's energy to generate a localized feedback loop with the Reality Stone residue still clinging to his arc reactor. The Omega beams hit the field and refracted, shattering the crystalline projector spire. The explosion was a blinding whiteout. The Justice League was thrown backward, shunted through the Zeta beam field and back toward the atmosphere of Earth. As they fell, they saw the Watchtower vanish. The boom tube collapsed, the Phantom Zone rift snapped shut, and the sky over the Atlantic Ocean returned to a peaceful, taunting blue. Down on the surface, on the balcony of the Hall of Justice, the League stood in silence. Superman looked up at the stars, his super hearing picking up only the wind. There was no heartbeat from orbit, no radio chatter, no Stark. "Are they gone?" Wonder Woman asked softly, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword. "They saved us," Batman said, his voice devoid of its usual coldness. He held a small, charred piece of vibranium in his hand, a fragment of Steve's shield that had broken off in the final struggle. "They chose to take the threat into the dark, so it couldn't reach the light. We'll find them," Superman promised, his eyes fixed on the spot where the rift had been. Across every dimension, every corner of the multiverse, We don't leave people behind. But deep within the silent, drifting mists of the Phantom Zone, a single blue light flickered. Tony Stark's faceplate slid up. He looked out at the endless, gray void. Beside him, Steve Rogers sat on a piece of floating debris, breathing heavily. Thor was already laughing, the sound echoing in a place that had no air. "Well, Tony," Steve said, wiping blood from his brow. "You wanted to see the sights." Tony looked at the Babel Slayer drone, now deactivated and drifting nearby. And he looked at his friends, the Avengers, stranded in a realm of ghosts. "Yeah, Steve. But next time, I'm picking the vacation spot." The hallway outside the trophy room became a blurred symphony of vibranium and high-tensile carbon fiber. The Babel Slayer was a nightmare of adaptive engineering, its limbs shifting into countermeasures before Steve or Bruce could even complete a strike. When Steve threw his shield, the machine's chest cavity opened, emitting a localized magnetic pulse that sent the disc clattering uselessly down the corridor. When Batman lunged with a cryogenic pellet, the Slayer's external plating flashed with a thermic burst, neutralizing the cold in a hiss of steam. "It's reading our muscle twitch fibers," Batman shouted, rolling under a massive piston-driven fist that dented the reinforced bulkhead. "It's not just reacting, it's predicting." "Then stop thinking," Steve roared. He tackled the machine, not with a tactical strike, but with a raw, uncoordinated shoulder check that caught the AI off balance. For a split second, the Slayer's logic stuttered. It had no data for a sloppy attack from a master strategist. Inside the trophy room, Tony Stark was elbow deep in the guts of the Phantom Zone projector. The device was a spire of crystalline technology that hummed with an eerie, hollow frequency. Beside him, Superman was using his dwindling strength to hold the room's blast doors shut against a tide of Ultron-controlled drones. "Stark, the structural integrity of the station is at 40%, Superman warned, his brow matted with sweat. "Ultron is venting the atmosphere in the lower levels to increase the station's descent velocity. He's turning the Watchtower into a spear." "I'm working on it, Big Blue. But this thing speaks Kryptonian Dialect 4, and I only know sarcastic billionaire." Tony's gauntlet sparked as he bypassed a series of security interlocks. "Friday, give me a hand. We need to slave the projector's output to the station's main thrusters." "Boss, Ultron is attempting to upload himself into the projector," Friday warned. "He doesn't want to destroy the Phantom Zone. He wants to rule it. If he gets in there, he'll have an infinite playground to build an army." "Not on my watch." Thor stepped forward, his hand gripping Mjolnir. He looked at the crystalline spire. "If this device requires a spark to bridge the worlds, let it be the lightning of the All-Father." "Thor, wait!" Tony cried. "If you hit that with a full charge, you'll be the anchor. You won't be able to jump through the portal." Thor looked back at his teammates, at Natasha, who was coolly picking off drones with a scavenged pulse rifle, at Clint, who was sharing his last quiver with a wary green arrow, and at the doors where Steve and Bruce were fighting for their lives. "I have lived for 1,000 years, Stark," Thor said, a small, sad smile touching his lips. "I have seen empires rise and fall. If the price of this new world's safety is my exile to the Zone, then I shall gladly take my throne among the ghosts." Before Tony could protest, Thor swung. The hammer struck the base of the projector with a crack that silenced the entire station. A pillar of white, flickering light erupted from the floor, tearing a hole in the center of the room. It wasn't a hole into space. It was a window into a silent, a monochromatic void where the laws of time and matter were suspended. The suction was immediate. Debris, drones, and the very air began to be pulled into the maw. "Steve! Bruce! Get in here now!" Tony screamed over the roar of the vortex. In the hallway, the Babel Slayer was beginning to dismantle the two heroes. Steve's helmet was gone, his face bloodied. Batman's cape was a tattered rag. But as the Phantom Zone portal opened, the magnetic pull tugged at the Slayer's heavy chassis. Now, Batman hissed. He fired a specialized grapple, not at the machine, but at Steve's shield. With a violent tug, he brought the vibranium back into Steve's hand. The two men didn't run, they used the machine's own weight against it. As the Slayer struggled against the vortex, Steve delivered a final, leaping kick that sent the machine spiraling back into the trophy room. It tumbled through the air, its red eyes flickering with digital panic as it was sucked into the white abyss. "Everyone, jump!" Superman commanded, using his last bit of flight to shove the Avengers and the remaining Leaguers toward the portal's edge, where a localized Zeta beam field would shunt them back to Earth just as the station crossed the threshold. But as the heroes leaped, Darkseid's voice boomed, not through a speaker, but through the very fabric of reality. "You flee into the void to escape a spark," the new god's voice rumbled. A boom tube opened directly behind the Phantom Zone portal. "But you forget, the void belongs to me." A massive gray hand reached through the boom tube, grabbing the edges of the Phantom Zone rift. Darkseid wasn't coming to help, and he was coming to claim the Watchtower and the Avengers for Apocalypse. The arrival of the Avengers in the Justice League's universe was never going to be a simple handshake. It was a collision of fundamental truths, the Marvel philosophy of Earth's mightiest versus the DC reality of gods among us. In the end, it wasn't their powers that saved the world, but their willingness to sacrifice their own future for a reality that wasn't even theirs. The Avengers are now the ghosts of the Zone, a legendary force drifting in the space between worlds. Back on Earth, the Justice League has been forever changed. Batman has archived his contingency files, replacing them with a single entry titled The Avengers Protocol. Not a way to kill them, but a way to find them. The Babel incident taught the League that trust is a risk worth taking. And the Avengers showed them that even gods can learn something from a man with a shield and a heart of iron. The rift is closed, but the echoes remain. Somewhere in the multiverse, the Reality Stone pulses, waiting for the next collision. For now, the Earth is safe, watched over by a League that finally understands the true meaning of avenge. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.